Hi Rose, this is your video feedback, your personalized video feedback session for your discussion board 1. Let's get this research question narrowed down. I also read your about me to get to know you a little bit. Great, I appreciate that. So one of the things I saw is that you have a background in preschool, and you have a lot of background, a lot of say interesting or good contributing background pieces here. If you haven't watched my other video about discussion board 1, please watch it. Most of my feedback here, these are all great questions. My goal here is not to diminish the quality of your question, or question whether or not these are good questions, noble questions to research. The thought is, are they doable? And so I want to problem solve some of these things. So I'm going to assume you put these in the order that you were most passionate about. I'm going to give you a bunch of feedback. You're going to think about it, take notes, pause the video, whatever, and then send me a second draft. Narrow this down to 2 questions, 1 question, and then we can just kind of wordsmith and detail that back and forth. So when I look at your questions, again, I want to think about, parent survey, teacher survey, parent interviews, teacher interviews. So I'm not sure what your population is going to be to get access, because it says, I think right now you're currently not working, which is fine. I don't know if you have access to go back to is this a Lutheran school, St. John's Lutheran School, or other private schools. I don't know what your subject pool is going to be. That's going to be really key for you to decide, because it does us no good to design this great study and then have no one to take the surveys or no way to get the data, right? All right, so research problem number 1, does reading to young children affect emergent reading skills? Yes is the answer, right, in the literature. So it's possible that you want to kind of confirm that, look at that. You may want to be more specific and narrow that. So the literature is pretty clear in supporting that. And then emergent reading skills. So how are you defining that? You don't need to put an elaborate definition in the research problem, but I need to know, and I need to know that you know how you're going to define emergent reading skills, and how you're defining young children. So you want to think about, because it's going to impact at different ages, it has different levels of impact, and there's a certain point where it's really diminishing returns, right? So so it's important that you figure out, does reading to preschoolers, kindergartners, first grade, second grade. Again, we're only talking about surveys in the numbers of 12, 15, 20. So if you can tap yourself into a kindergarten class or 2 kindergartners, 2 kindergarten classes that max out at 48 students, and you can get 20 surveys back, maybe that would be, maybe that'd be perfect. Maybe you're going to have an age range. You have to think about the logistics. At this point, it's time to think about the logistics. So, and so this feels to me like, because you're going to find this in the literature. How much should you read to your children? What should you read to your children? So, it's going to answer those questions. Now, you can replicate that in your setting, and that's okay. So as you look at this, it's going to be, but how much do parents read to their children? How much do they read where it makes a difference? And so you're going to be surveying parents to say, how much are you reading to your children? Or how much do you think you should read to your children? How much time do you take reading to your children? Does it matter what type of material? What type of material do you read? Maybe it's multiple choice, this, the other. Is it adventure books, comic books, newspaper, whatever? Probably not the newspaper. Picture books, chapter books. It's going to depend on their age range. Who plays a more important role in reading to the child, the teacher or the parent? So again, all those things you're going to find in the literature, and you're not really going to be able to find those in that survey. So if you turn in that, maybe turns into, if this is what you're interested in, maybe this is about parents' perception of what's important. So what do parents think? What do parents of young children or preschoolers or K through 3, third grade children, what are their perceptions of the importance of reading to them? And so, how the survey is, how important do you think it is to read? How much time do you think you should spend? How much time do you spend? What type of things do you think you should read to your children? What do you read to your children? Do you think your role as a parent is more important than the role as a teacher? So maybe we kind of mold this into a parent perception about reading. Kind of what do they know and what are they doing? And then, so you would need to match up those students, unless you want the parents to assess. So how well does your student read? And again, you need to kind of get a reasonable way to measure that. Even if it's parent response, what are they going to say and how are you going to compare that between people? It's a little complicated, a little cumbersome, certainly something you can do. And then if we're moving in that direction, then we'll come back and clean up your hypotheses and research questions. If you're going to go with number 2, again, so we know the parent positively influences the child's reading level. So I'm just going to look down here. So is quality time with the child important? Is the amount? So does the, what factors, what home factors or what parent factors influence a child's reading ability would be maybe a better way to state that. And then you would say parent or home factors such as reading to their child, spending quality time with them, having a positive attitude towards reading, all positively influence a child's reading ability. And then your null hypothesis would be those things don't influence the child. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at your sub-questions 1, 2, and 3 and kind of picking up those pieces and embedding them into the hypothesis. So is quality time with the child important? Yes. The answer. Is the amount of time spent with the child important? So I wonder how you're defining amount of time spent versus quality time, and how are those different in your mind? Because they seem possibly the same thing. And then when it comes to measurement, I think parent attitude towards reading is important. And again, maybe that falls under that parent perception. So maybe you're combining some of these things. You have kind of a lot to think through and sort out here. So this is the third question. It's a great question as far as availability of text in the home. So again, but your questions are about, is it important? If you're going to replicate and answer those questions, is it important, then you're going to need to have 10 surveys where people have a lot of text or, spend a lot of quality time, and 10 students where they don't. And then you're going to compare, looks like the students who have a lot of books read better than the students who don't. So the trouble with that is that if you sample 20 families, you may not get 10 with a lot of books and 10 without. You may get 18 with a lot of books and 2 without. So it's difficult to compare. And so that type of, it's almost quasi-experimental setup may not be the way you want to go, at least in that detail. Again, so parent surveys about how many texts, either the perception of how much, the importance of these things, or you're surveying them as far as how many books do you have in the home. How many books? I couldn't tell you how many books I have in my home, and it's not because I'm a bookworm or we're talking about, maybe you're categorizing it as far as less than 10, between 10 and 50, or more than 50. And so maybe you're seeing how many books do you have in the home, and does that relate to how often they read? So maybe that's 3 groups of people, right? People who don't have that many books, people who have plenty of books, and people have a ton of books. So you're asking them, how many books do you have? And then How often do you read to your child? Or how many minutes a day do you spend reading to your child? Socioeconomic status, that's perfectly legitimate. It's obviously kind of a touchy piece, or it's a personal data piece, but I think it's certainly legitimate. And provided you get people to fill that out, I think that's great. You'll find some ways to measure socioeconomic status that's kind of non-threatening as far as how much money do you make on your W-2, right? There's more broader, what's the highest level of parental education. And then your interest in electronic books versus actual paper textbooks. Good distinction. So basically what I'm finding here is you have a lot of good pieces. I want you to think about this in terms of, I just want you to go back and start. Say, how are you going to collect your data? What's the best way, most time efficient way for you to collect this data? If it's going to be a parent survey, you may want to work backwards a little bit and use some of these questions in pre-designing a parent survey. If it's going to be a teacher survey, or if you're going to need teachers to weigh in on the child's reading level, or if you're going to ask the parents to weigh in, hey, does my child read pretty good, not so good, better than average, better than I think other kids do? You're going to kind of work through those. Again, all these are great factors. You may combine all these into one research, not all of them, and capture all this curiosity. It's a lot to think about. I did read also that your goal is not to turn out to be, go into major in-depth into research. So don't dwell on this for hours and hours and hours. Give it some thought. I would recommend, like I said, you work on, how am I going to get my data? Like, what's my best case scenario in getting the data? And then kind of work backwards from there. And maybe you end up having a question about what influences what, but really what we're going to have is perceptions of parents and self-reports or surveys. And you're going to report, or interviews, out of this many parents open-ended, a lot of them divulge this, a lot of them divulge this. I wonder if there's a relationship between this and the child's reading level. All right. So I hope that should be helpful. It's not definitive, and I expect we're going to go back and forth a couple more times. That's okay. If I find that your response is pretty close and we can just do text, email back and forth, I definitely will. If I need another video, I will. I just feel like the video conveys tone, and I want everyone to know. But it's a great start. We're going to work through this back and forth a couple times, and you're going to nail it. We'll turn you loose on your literature review. You're going to keep moving. All right. Have a great night.